He's worked as a systems platform engineer for Bronto Software in Durham and is now a remote site reliability engineer for MailChimp, which is based in Atlanta. He values the community and strives to be a positive influence within it, and feels everyone deserves to be heard, and he's always ready to lend a hand or ear to those in need. And so he's looking forward to serving on the planning board. So welcome, Daniel.
Welcome, Daniel.
So those are our new folks that are coming to us. We do have someone who's leaving us. Senior planner Sarah Van Every, who has served the town for the past 5 years, is leaving to be the development services manager in Garner. And her last day is tomorrow, and so recruitment for the senior planner position is underway. So thank you, Sarah, for your service.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right. Public comment section. The purpose of public comment is to allow the public to speak on items that do not appear in this agenda under public hearings. Any member of the public wishing to speak on the public hearing items will be called at the appropriate time later in this agenda. If you've not done so already, please sign in my right, your left, for the particular item that you would like to discuss. If there are a large number of speakers for a particular item, I'm going to ask that you have a representative speak on your behalf. Individuals would have 3 minutes, and that would be the limit for their speaking, but as the group, they would get 9. If comments on a single topic should not be repetitive in nature, if comments were already made by another speaker, please state I agree with that particular speaker and do not repeat what was stated. We also have the ability to view on YouTube on the town's YouTube channel. Item number 1 up for consent are the minutes from the October 10th, 2022 regular meeting. I assume everybody has read the meetings. Are there any changes that we need to make, or do we have a possible motion to approve them?
I move to approve the minutes from the October regular meeting.
I have a motion from Tina. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
A second from Tim. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposing? All right, passes unanimously. So in the public hearings section, I will call folks up to talk during the particular time. We're going to move now to item number 1. Shannon Cox is going to discuss a possible motion regarding amendment to the thoroughfare and collector streets.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you. We do have amendments to both the thoroughfare and collector street plan map as well as the bicycle and pedestrian system plan map today. These amendments are within the approved legacy planned unit development, which is just south of US 64 and west of the American Tobacco Trail. When the Legacy PUD was rezoned, they included a roundabout, a future roundabout, shown along this future major collector street. As they've moved forward with their site planning process, it's been determined that this roundabout is no longer needed. They do not have a 3-legged intersection here as originally anticipated with their rezoning, so there's really no need for a roundabout. Along with that, the future greenway that was shown in this location is proposed to shift slightly north, so a relatively minor greenway realignment. So the proposed amendments are removal of the roundabout and a slight shift to the greenway alignment. Planning staff have no concerns with these amendments. We're fully supportive. Our emergency services and transportation staff and Parks and Rec staff also had no concerns, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Shannon?
Yes.
I saw in the notes that there is a proposed school or residential area. Where on the map about where that is going to be?
I'm sorry, a proposed what area?
School?
School. I believe that it's this portion of the property that's been considered in the future. So, outside of what's being developed right now as part of the Legacy Station development.
When you say outside, can you point to that again? Because it looks like it's pretty adjacent.
So, the Legacy Station project, which is under, site plan review now, extends to approximately this location. And then, there is a copy in your staff report, it'll be easier to see there. The remainder is for a future phase and has been considered, for a possible school site. Thanks.
So wondering how the removal will affect the future school site and the flow of traffic, and how that was all considered.
So if you look at that proposed site plan in your staff report, this entire area would be developed as part of Legacy Station. And they have multiple driveway connections off of here and no intersection in this location. So it would really just be a roundabout in the middle of a road with no intersection. So, you know, I don't think that's where we would ever recommend a roundabout. It's not a traffic calming approach, it's more for an intersection treatment. I think when the school, if it moves forward, we would look at any necessary traffic calming as part of that project.
Can you remind us, I'm just trying to figure out why the roundabout, I remember a few years ago that roundabouts were incredibly popular. So I'm trying to rewind back to why there was a roundabout put there to begin with, and so therefore the need to remove it.
Sure, so, you're right, we did an internal study of, locations where we would recommend roundabouts on our transportation plan. And, have numerous roundabouts recommended and still supported on our transportation plan. This was not one of those. It wasn't identified as part of that process. It was proposed with the rezoning, because they anticipated that they would have an intersection in this location and that there would be the greenway right there. So it would be a good intersection treatment. That's no longer how the site's moving forward. So, for that reason, staff have no problem with the request to remove it.
Thank you for walking me back down memory lane.
Well, it was a fun analysis, so.
Any other questions for Shannon? Possible motion?
I think you want to have a public hearing first.
Thank you. Thank you for keeping me honest. All right, I will open the public comment section for this particular item. Do we have anybody signed up to speak? Did we get any emails? All right, then I will close the public comment section and bring it back to the board for discussion and a possible motion.
Motion to approve the amendment?
I have a motion to approve from Amanda. Excuse me, that's not Amanda, it's Alyssa. I have a motion from Alyssa. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And I have a second from Tina. All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposing? All right, that passes unanimously. Item number 2, we'll hear from Amanda on public hearing and possible motion regarding rezoning case 21CZ18, the Olive Chapel Professional Park.
All right, good afternoon. This rezoning is located in the kind of northwest central part of Apex on the north side of Olive Chapel Road, west of Chapel Ridge Road. And it's now known as the Olive Chapel Professional Park, and there are currently 3 out of the 5 buildings that have been approved for this development that have been constructed on site. The current zoning is office and institutional conditional zoning. The site is about 8.7 acres. And the proposal was to amend a couple of uses, to add 2 uses to the current list of uses, and no changes to the existing zoning conditions on the property. The 2045 land use map designates this property as office employment, and the proposed zoning is consistent with that land use classification. So like I said, the site is about 8.7 acres. There have been 2 neighborhood meetings, actually 3 neighborhood meetings held on the site. When the case was originally submitted, there was a neighborhood meeting held just before that in July. And then due to the length of time from the initial submittal until public hearing time, the applicant held another neighborhood meeting in August. And then realizing there were interested parties just outside of the notification radius that really needed to be included, they held an additional meeting in October to include more residents in the Chapel Ridge neighborhood that fell out of that 300-foot notification area. The 2 uses that are proposed to be added to the site are pet services and tailor shop. These were not uses that were allowed in the office and institutional zoning district back in 2016 when the parcel was originally zoned. We added those to the UDO within the last year-ish. I don't recall the exact date, but it's been fairly recently that those uses were added to the O&I district, and the applicant is interested in having those as possibilities within this development. With that, staff is recommending approval of the proposed rezoning, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Amanda?
How do we define pet services?
I knew someone was going to ask that, and I meant to have that definition up. Generally, it's not a veterinary clinic or anything that has an outdoor area for pets. So it's only things internal, so like a doggy wash, a pet spa, something that's pet oriented would fall under that.
So no
that
outdoor
use.
boarding?
No boarding at all associated with that use.
Amanda, I know that we've had conversations in the past about pet crematories. Is that part of this?
That would be an accessory use that would be permitted, whether or not anyone wanting to locate here with this use wanted to do that or not. But yeah, it is allowed as an accessory use, so it has to be a very small portion of the overall business, not the primary.
Thank you. Anything else for Amanda? Did the applicant want to speak?
Hello, everybody.
Nope.
My name is Patrick Kiernan with Jones & Knosson Engineering, 221 North Salem Street, Suite 001. Just thank you, Amanda, for explaining everything. I don't need to rehash everything that you said. A couple things I wanted to clarify. One off the bat, you mentioned 3 neighborhood meetings. I just wanted to clarify. The first one was from a year ago when we came forward with the restaurant healthcare facility. I think it's sort of a technicality that this is the same zoning case, yes, even though the original uses and everything had been pulled. So we were looking at it as a fresh rezoning, but technically it's the same rezoning case. So that's the first of the 3 that she was referring to.
So that was the square footage?
Correct, yeah. So no meeting that you weren't aware of. She mentioned that there was an additional meeting that was held about a month after the first one. We held the first meeting right before the submittal based on the town's requirements of the 300-foot range. After speaking with a couple of the neighbors, came to my attention that another meeting would be beneficial to have the whole neighborhood involved, just given the history of the rezoning. So that was the meeting that was held in October, just to clarify. And then the other clarification was about the pet crematory. We discussed, and Ms. Boykin and I discussed after, and I don't think there was a need to necessarily put a condition in there about it. And when I spoke with Mr. Gazarovski, really I think kind of the big question with that is, would the cremating happen on site? And I don't think anybody's intent would be for that sort of use to take place in a professional business park. So we contemplated, should there be a condition that excludes pet crematory from the use. And the only reason we kind of considered not adding that condition was if there was a service that provided some of the supplemental aspects of, pet crematory service, but didn't do the cremating there. Some of the, picking out, the vase or, what have you. If maybe there was a small shop space there, but they did the cremating elsewhere, we didn't want to exclude that potential tenant down the road. So if it became something that, was a concern, then could there be a condition in there written about the act of cremating wouldn't take place on site? I don't know. We sort of decided that it was getting a little bit too convoluted and unlikely. So we don't have any conditions in there right now. If it became an issue, we're happy to consider. But beyond that, Amanda said it best. It was 2 uses that the town in, I think it was January 2019, did a UDO amendment, and just based on similar uses and in the O&I zoning district, it was decided and voted on back then that those 2 uses, Pet Services and Taylor, are both appropriate for O&I CZ. And the only reason that they were not included in 2016 was because they were not allowable uses in the UDO. So they were never even brought up during that discussion. So that's the long and short of it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Kiernan? No?
Thank you.
I will open up the public comment section. Do we have anyone that is not signed in who wants to speak today? How you doing, Ms. Boykin?
Good afternoon. My name is Rita Boykin, and Ray and I live at 1500 Clark Farm Road. In 2016, the Gazarovskis requested rezoning for their property on Chapel Ridge Road. This included allowable uses and square footage limitations for that property. They submitted to the town of Apex those uses and limitations which were approved. 3 times since then, they have approached the town of Apex to make changes to the original rezoning request. The first time was in 2019, when they were already in the process of leasing to someone who was not even on the list of allowable uses. The second time was last year, when they wanted to change square footage limitations, but due to financial costs they would have had to incur, they withdrew that rezoning request. This is the third time, and now they want to add 2 more uses. This pattern of wanting to make changes to their original 2016 request is deeply troubling, and therefore we can only believe that this pattern will continue even after their office complex is completed. Regarding this particular rezoning request, they had their engineer, Patrick, arrange and lead a neighborhood Zoom meeting on August the 31st. 2 parties were present, Will Gazarovski and the Faulkners. The lack of participants was due to the fact that we and others were not notified of this meeting. Another meeting was then arranged for October 19th. More neighbors received notice and were present. However, no one from the Gazarovski family was present. Questions were asked that Patrick was unable to answer. He was to contact the Gazarovskis to get those answers. Late Friday, 3 weeks after the October meeting, Patrick emailed me with a response. I find it interesting that those responses were not sent until this weekend before this meeting tonight. We remain dubious of anything dealing with the OCPP, as there have been issues with them since 2016. We feel that repeatedly requesting changes is troubling, and that they need to adhere to the allowable uses and limitations decided upon 7 years ago. So yes, we are opposed to any changes and/or additions they wish to make to their office complex. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boykin. Anyone else to speak on this topic? Amanda, did we get any emails in for this one?
Just one from Ms. Boykin.
Okay, thank you. All right, I will close the public hearing section and bring it back to the board for discussion and possible motion.
I do have a question for Ms. Boykin. The uses that are proposed that the applicants come forth with, do you and the neighbors take opposition to those 2 uses? I know it's the change is of concern, but what about the actual use?
me, it's the uses entirely. If this goes past, what's gonna happen in the future? And we had heard from them before, if you let this go, we won't come back. And they have come back, in a sense, twice since then. It's more or less opened the door to more changes. We're just hesitant about that. I won't say the relationship, I mean, all of y'all are new, so y'all don't know the history. Although you got some last month, a little bit, but it's been going on for a long time with their neighborhood. And, so it's just opening the door to other possibilities down the road and having to come back all the time to, issues they want to change.
Ryan, I appreciate that you asked that question. I would like to ask a follow-up question, Ms. Boykin, and appreciate the conversation around pet services and crematoria services. I understand the concern is around the addition, and that's sort of the overarching concern. Are there any specific concerns as it relates to the crematoria? There has been a discussion around not around putting that as a condition, and so I just want to make sure that either that is or is off the table or is not off the table, or if you would like to see it on the table or not at all. Again, understanding your overarching is that in opposition to the changes and the constant changes.
The crematorium is a concern of mine. I just, I guess I was associated with more of a vet than I do a pet, store. From what they were saying, that pet, store would do would be, giving dogs baths, keep grooming, and I just don't connect that with crematorium. When I've had pets before, and we've had to put them down, that's been done at the vet. And if there was anything, if we were gonna go do a crematorium, the vet did that. I can't imagine going to PetSmart and having them do that. So that was when I read, that on the list of those, uses for the pet store, I just didn't care for that at all.
Okay, so I come back to the applicant, hearing that is a concern and understanding that there was a willingness to add that condition. Is that something you're willing to add?
Yeah, I think so. I think Amanda and I can talk tomorrow about the wording on it. But yeah, there was no, there is, to your point, I don't think there's any idea that would ever be a service that would take place at this business park. So I think it's more of just the way the use is written. The pet crematoria was kind of thrown in at the end, and I do agree it doesn't really line up with some of the other things in pet services. So whether it's there or not, it's not a huge concern. Of course, with just a rezoning, it's always easy to just present the uses as they're written by the town. If conditions are necessary to make everybody more comfortable, then we're happy to consider that.
I mean, I would love if we could see that. I think just being explicit is really helpful. And then I think, Amanda, if we could maybe talk about a UDO to ensure that pet services does include or not include, whatever. I'm not sure what's needed around a crematorium, but just.
So I believe there's already a vet at this business park, and that is already an allowed use. And so this change to add this would actually take away something that they already are allowed to do.
That's what I'm wondering. How is this in opposition to what's already permitted with the veterinary clinic or hospital? Because I also wondered what pet services were. Looked that up in the UDO. It's indoor establishments, spa, grooming, training, photography, and of course crematory. But again, it's a symbiotic use with the veterinary clinic.
Yeah, and I apologize. I should have mentioned that was currently one of our allowable uses, and I didn't make that connection in my mind with the pet crematory. But you're right, I agree. I think it does kind of line up more with vet services. And that was part of the reason when it came to our attention that those two uses were added to the O&I allowable list in the UDO. It was like, well, we have vet services already. Pet services is, sort of complements it. If anything, it's, potentially more appropriate in a business park like this to have a dog groomer or something of that sort. So it's sort of just following in line with the town's example there. So the question of pet crematory on our behalf is trivial, I think, but to that same point, we're happy to amend it if
Well,
necessary.
I wonder, so going back to the allowable uses, I don't know what else is in the office park at the moment, but I understand that permitted uses includes veterinary clinic or hospital, and if a crematorium were connected to that, that's different than pet services, and a pet services, the crematorium being connected to the pet services. So the allowable uses, I understand in this particular instance, it may not be, to your point, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Alyssa. To your point, Alyssa, I think in this particular point, adding it may, and then removing crematorium could potentially be alienating or taking something away that is already there, but I think it's the clarification of what is included in pet services that would be critical, if that makes sense. Something for a UDO conversation.
Yeah, that sounds like a UDO amendment.
We just added this a couple months ago at the request of someone who operates a pet services use. We reviewed state law, could find no extra standards or limitations on the pet cremation use, and we ensured that we wrote it so that it would be an accessory to pet services and not the primary use. With the respect to this use and this development, as someone pointed out, that's already allowed. This is a typical accessory use already with the vet use that could potentially locate here. So it's really the same thing happening, just under the umbrella of a different primary use. So it's not likely to be something common. It's not something we see very often. And so that's staff's perspective on that.
So the existing vet could expand their footprint in this office park and have another service.
If there were a vet, I don't know that there is, but if there were a vet in this office park, it could offer cremation services. Yes.
Thank you.
And we just added that to the UDO a couple months ago, right?
That's
Yes, it's
2
been
months.
within the last
2 months.
2 to 4 months, yeah.
Any additional discussion on this or a possible motion?
So it's my understanding that when they did rezone in 2016, and the O and I did not call for these uses, but in 2019, they were added. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So now they're part of the O and I rezoning classification.
Yeah, some points I'm gonna make. I'm in favor of this, but I'm not gonna dismiss the neighborhood's concern about the change. However, 2016, there's a lot that's happened in the last 6 years that I would never say you can't change based on economic and, national things that happen, and trends change and people have uses that change. So what I will say though is that we have a process that involves a neighborhood meeting, of which this applicant did two really, two. And I think that's how the system works, and I think it worked well, and the neighbors were here to voice their concern, and we had a great debate about it. So I'm in favor of this. I don't think that there's a huge risk, and I think that it's in keeping with the UDO, so I don't see it's not at odds with the town's vision, so I'm in favor.
I echo Ryan's sentiment. Thank you, Ryan. I agree that this is the system worked the way it was supposed to. I appreciate that the applicant, in realizing that the town's initial reaching out of neighbors, that it was a good idea to go back. I thoroughly appreciate that, and feel like you all went above and beyond in that arena. And then for the neighbors, Ms. Boykin, for you all to have an opportunity to come here and express your concerns is absolutely the way it's supposed to work. And I think if there So for those same reasons, I will be voting in favor of this. So I'm happy to make a motion.
All right. Tina, you're making a motion that says what?
To approve the rezoning application for the Olive Chapel Professional Park.
All right.
I'll second.
Tim will second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposing? All right. This passes unanimously, 21 CZ 18. Item 3, Shelley's going to talk to us about a public hearing and possible motion regarding rezoning case 22 CZ 18, the Hume Olive Place.
Good evening, everybody.
Good
Good
evening.
evening.
Just to give you an idea of where we're talking about, we're on the kind of the southwestern-ish side of town. Hume Olive Road is the road that runs right in front of Apex Friendship High School. The development that we're talking about is literally across the street from the main parking lot. Currently zoned medium-density residential, and that was rezoned in 2016. And it is proposed to be rezoned as medium-density conditional zoning. That does meet the 2045 land use map for medium-density residential. Just to give you an idea, this is a 2-acre parcel. The zoning was, like I said, approved in 2016 for it. The applicant has already got 4 lots under development and 4 houses built. They're duplex units, so it's a total of 8 units total. In this area right here, there was a portion of a stream buffer there when it was originally rezoned, designed, and started construction. That portion of the stream buffer has dried up. So there's nothing there anymore that requires protection from state law. So at the applicant's request, this rezoning was brought in with the request to increase the density for this development. It was originally, a cap was added that was 4.5 units per acre, so a maximum of 9 units total. The applicant has requested that that be changed to no more than 6 units per acre, so a total of 12 units. They attended the Environmental Advisory Board meeting in July 21st. And as a part of that, they added several new conditions as well. They are keeping everything that they committed to in 2016. They are only requesting that density change, and as a part of the EAB's review process, they have added some environmental conditions. The environmental conditions are that 1 new duplex building shall provide an active photovoltaic solar system for a total of 2 systems, so that, 1 building, 2 units. The project shall install at least 1 pet waste station in a location that's publicly accessible, such as a side path, sidewalk, or SCM. And all RCA landscape plantings shall be native species. Landscaping shall be coordinated and approved by the planning department at site or subdivision plan review. So this area back here is roughly where they expect that RCA to be. As you can see, there's not a whole lot there at the moment, and they would be planting that to go along with everything. We did receive a letter of impact from Wake County Public Schools. They stated that elementary, middle, and high schools within the current assignment area are anticipated to have insufficient capacity for future students. School expansion or construction within the next 5 years may address concerns at the high school level, and possible long-term solutions may include capping, reassignments, or calendar changes. This does not have an affordable housing component to it. There are a total of 12 units maximum. And with CJ Craig, our previous affordable housing manager, met with the applicant after looking over the pro forma, looking at the possibilities associated with this. They didn't see where it would be financially possible for this developer to actually offer affordable housing. The developer is already building relatively small duplex units that will, to some degree, provide a certain amount of naturally occurring affordable housing. So that was the recommendation that came from CJ before he left. There were 2 additional recommendations that the EAB made at the time that were not added. One of them was for even more photovoltaic or solar panel systems. There were actually 2 kind of conflicting conditions that came out of the EAB that day. We didn't get the perfect clarity that we normally try to get out of the meeting. So we ended up accidentally having 2 solar conditions. One for a single building with 2 systems, and one for 3 buildings for a total of 6 systems, and the rest of it to have the conduit installed for future installation. Because of the size of this, staff felt that the 1 building with 2 systems was more appropriate, especially given the percentages that we typically see that are providing solar systems. And so we worked with the applicant to do that one. The EAB also recommended adding signage or some other kind of marking or fencing at the boundary at the RCA, which would indicate that that area beyond the signage is RCA and is not supposed to be disturbed. Because we do rather regularly have property owners who think that, oh, that wooded area would be great if I could clear it and put some sod down and my kids could have a slightly bigger backyard, even though it doesn't belong to them. Unfortunately, the developer did not feel like that was something they could commit to at this time. The applicant is here to answer any questions about it. Staff recommends approval as proposed by the applicant. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Yes, sir?
So in the background, when it states that there's an intermittent stream, do we know, and just by the definition of intermittent, comes and goes, is it going to come back, or do we know why it's no longer there?
Sure. I actually got a little bit of an education on exactly this question when this came up, so I'm happy to share that. When someone goes out, when an environmental consultant is hired to go out and do what we call a buffer call, they actually have a checklist that's provided by and standardized by the Department of Environmental Quality. And they look for a lot of different things, including vegetation, that typically indicates whether or not that stream is going to come back. If it's been long enough since that stream has had water in it, that vegetation dies off, and we generally don't see that come back. And so they actually go through, and it's a very straightforward, standardized process, and they score basically 2 or 3 sheets that have 3 different columns on there and come up with a number at the very bottom. And that number tells you whether you have a stream, whether it's an ephemeral stream, whether it's intermittent, which has a 50-foot buffer on either side, or whether it's a perennial stream, which means it has water in it all the time and has 100 feet on either side. In this case, it either was dried up entirely or is now an ephemeral stream, which the state does not require us to protect, and which our UDO does not offer protection for at this point. And I did double check with Jessica Boland, who is our stormwater manager, and she double checked and confirmed that all of that had been done correctly, and then we had all that paperwork on file.
Thank you.
So, you're welcome. And generally speaking, it dries up because the topography in the surrounding area changes, or the development in the area kind of redirects how the water flows and percolates into the soil, and that's why it dries up.
Do we have a sense of how long it's been dried up?
We don't. Unfortunately, it's a point in time evaluation. The owner might know, but I don't have that information, unfortunately.
Could you, I believe I may have missed earlier, did you say that the developer this is another phase of the project? Is that what I understand? That he owns or he's developed other sections in this area? Did I I don't know if I misheard that as I was.
Sure, no. In a way, what you're saying is correct, is completely true. However, it's all within this existing yellow line. There's it's hard to see on the screen, and I apologize for that. Maybe I can zoom in.
Oh,
Okay.
So do you see this black line here?
yes.
That is an existing lot that's already been recorded.
Okay.
There's another one here where the hand is. This third one here and the fourth one here. So these have already pulled permits for building. And I think this one is either in review or maybe it's just gotten the permit.
And is-
This is the road that it's going to come off of, and he's asking to put 2 additional units off of that road right here.
and that makes a total of 12?
It'll make 10 at that point. I think they're trying to evaluate whether they can get the full 12 in or not. But I know of at least 10 that they're gonna be able to fit in.
I have a question about the fence.
Yes, sir?
I don't recall a condition of putting a fence around any other RCA. But I don't know what that would look like. It's supposed to be a conservation area. The fence is not a requirement. Is that just something the town wants? It's not,
It was something that the EAB has discussed in the past. In this particular case, the recommendation was for a sign, but they've also discussed the possibility of fence. The suggestion that staff has made to the EAB when they've discussed that is to have a split rail fence, because that would allow existing wildlife to get over, under, and through, while still providing a visual barrier for, people's munchkins or whoever might happen to decide they want to wander through. I'm all about wandering in places, so I get it. But that way, we wouldn't be preventing wildlife from crossing through places, all of the
that's
still.
not my concern. I just was looking at a 6-foot fence and I was thinking, well, that just kind of goes against the RCA.
So I saw, yeah,
It's just kind of,
yeah.
yeah.
No, it would be, in this case, the developer's not proposing it, but it would be up to the developer to decide what kind they would want. But our recommendation has been for a split rail or ranch style fence, just because they're less expensive to put up and maintain, and they also help the
Visual barrier
wildlife.
of what you-
Right. Mm-hmm. So that, parents can point at it and go, don't go past there. And then, hopefully that works,
I guess the creek dried up, the wells dry up all the time, so.
especially in this part of town.
Yeah, my dad's just drove it a couple months ago, it just quit.
Yep.
Okay.
Can we go back to the intermittent stream?
Yes, ma'am.
And I think I'm gonna ask you a question that you're not gonna be able to answer.
I have an engineer here who can.
Oh, yes. I understand, I think I understand, the town's and the state's requirement as it relates to this sort of moment in time that we have captured for the stream being dried up. I'm concerned. I'm concerned about putting homes on a place that previously had a stream, regardless of sort of, like, if we don't have an idea if it's been dried up for 100 years, I may not have a concern.
I can guarantee you it has not been dried up for 100 years because it was there in 2016 when it was evaluated. They expire every 5 years. The buffer calls expire every 5 years. So I apologize if that's what you were asking and I just misunderstood.
Nope. That is helpful. Do we have any engineer? Maybe the right person to answer this question. Do we have some? 2016 wasn't that long ago. Do we have any idea from, do these streams that have previously, been dry, how often they come back, when they come back? I say this with the understanding that the EPA is currently considering reevaluating its 100-year floodplain because 100-year floods are happening more frequently. And so I'm literally concerned that we are considering placing homes on a place that had water just, I'm not going to be able to do math, 6 years ago?
I will defer most of my response to Peter. He's the
Yes.
engineer. I will say, though, that without a stream channel, and the stream channel would be filled in order to build the house, just because you can't have a gap underneath your foundation. Without that stream channel, it's less likely that would reform, in my experience. And I haven't heard of any streams reforming after they've dried up in this area. Granted, that's not my specific field, and it's possible it may have happened just saying, I haven't heard of anything. Peter, if you have better information? I'll add to it when I come up. Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions for Shelley? Thank you, Shelley. The applicant like to speak?
Good evening, Chair, members of the board. Peter Knosson, Jones Knosson Engineering, 221 North Salem Street in Apex. We are the consultant engineering for the owner, developer, construction masters for this Hume Olive Place. Thank you, Shelley. Very thorough. I'll just get into the bullet points, so to speak. Regarding the buffer, which has been removed. Buffer calls are allowed to be challenged every 5 years or changed every 5 years. And we were involved in the original rezoning on this property back in 2016. This is really just a wet weather ditch. It doesn't have a primary feed of water to it. There's actually storm drainage in Blazing Trail. There's catch basins which really feed this little drainage feature. Back when the original buffer was called, it was really just it just met the marginal requirements to have a stream buffer. We had it reviewed this year. I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was in June. The town came out, their environmental folks, they reviewed the stream for whether the stream is cutting, whether the size of it, the geomorphology of the area. And they just felt like the buffer no longer was required on the feature, so it was removed. And given that all the infrastructure is in place for the alley, all we're going to do really is just add lots to it. There's no additional infrastructure that's required to add these lots. One thing that will come into play with this development, and I'm not sure whether we're going to be able to add one more duplex or two, because we're going to have to do stormwater. The original approval on this development was exempt from stormwater. It didn't meet the requirements. But we add one more lot. Actually, if we turn one more square foot of dirt, we are no longer exempt from stormwater. So stormwater is now going to be added if we come in with a new development plan, which it didn't have before. And again, that eats up, square footage of land, which takes away from development opportunity in terms of an additional structure. So we're hoping, obviously, to add another, at least one, maybe two, but that won't be known until we actually get into the land planning and the sizing of the storm water feature that's going to need to be required for this.
Do we have an idea of where that will be placed?
It'll
In
be,
terms of the stream, actually, it should be more explicit.
it'll be placed, is this working? It'll be placed right in this area here. That stream comes, if you follow the hand, follows that alignment, and that area there is the low part of the site. So any kind of stormwater structure will need to be sited there. Is related to the signage of the RCA. I'm not opposed to it. That's probably my stubbornness is why we didn't offer it. My stance and position on that is if we're going to be requiring signage on RCA, I think that should be a change that's made to the UDO, make that a standard requirement across the board if we're going to do signage. If you want that, we will certainly offer it up and do it. But like I said, I think those things are better off made a requirement in the UDO. So anyway, I won't go into any more unless you have any questions. Shelley did a really nice job on everything as far as the conditions that we've added based on our meeting with the EAB and also the affordability component that we did consider when we met with the town, and it was decided that it was not warranted given the size of the development. So if you have any questions, I'm certainly here to address anything.
Can you share, since CJ is not here, can you share a little bit about how we came to the conclusion that the affordability was not warranted?
Well, he had several spreadsheets, and I'm not going to say that I understand all that inner working of all the line items that were in in that spreadsheet, but basically when we told him and he saw that we just had a 4 duplex units, he just said, there's no way that this will meet the requirement for affordability. He said that you need density to make the affordable component work, and he said this wasn't even close. So it was really more for us and my client, it was more of an informational, once he learned of the number of lots that we were talking about in this particular development. So it was a lot of good information, for sure, for certain. But I mean, he has all these spreadsheets that he was bringing up and putting numbers here and numbers there, and he knew it wasn't going to work, and he was very upfront about that.
So tell me, I think I'm confused because I've heard 4, I've heard 10, I've heard 12, and then I've heard duplex. And I understand you have the property is in the northern. I shouldn't say northern because I'm not sure which direction. In the top part of the screen. So can you share how many lots? Because I understand that this zoning is 4, but there's additional properties, additional lots there that you own.
Right now, right now we are recorded for 4 duplex lots.
Okay.
Each lot will have a building with 2 units.
Okay.
So the 4 lots times 2 units gives you 8 units total. That's what we're allowed to do right now with the current zoning. When we go to, if we're approved to go to 6 units per acre, we'll be allowed to have up to 12 units. So it will allow us to put 2 more duplex lots on the property.
Allow you to put,
If it will fit.
allow you to put 2 more for a total of 12 duplex units. The 4 were already approved. The previous ones they're already plotted. They're already,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Okay, thank you.
Sir? I will open up the public comment section. Has anyone signed in to talk about 22 CZ 18? Anyone in the audience?
Sorry, I forgot my-
Shelley, did we get any emails on this one?
Sorry, sir, no, we did not.
All right, thank you. All right, I will close the public comment section and bring it back to the board for discussion and possible motion.
Well, I'll say I like it. I think it makes sense what they're doing, and they're adding the environmental conditions. They're, although it's not qualifying under affordable housing, duplexes in this area is affordable housing. I mean, it's maybe not under the definition, but it is. The whole thing is. And the pond, as far as the stormwater regulations, the environmental experts, the RCA, I don't know about it. I thought the RCA was, the fence around the RCA just seems unnecessary. I haven't heard of it before, and I think it kind of defeats the purpose, in my opinion. That's just my opinion.
I agree.
I don't know what you guys think. But
I agree.
Agree.
So are you making a motion where we don't have a fence, or what are you saying?
yeah, that would be my motion, yes.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion.
Or signage,
All right.
Yeah.
and signage.
I'm sorry.
We don't need a sign saying there's trees here.
Right.
No, we don't.
So is the motion just for as it stands, or is there something that you're adding that I'm not catching?
It's motion to approve, but not necessarily with the fence. We were not worried about the fence or signing for the RCA.
Okay, so
Was
as
the fence included
it
originally?
was not included originally, neither was the sign. Okay, thank
Well, that
you.
was just a recommendation for the environmental. Well, okay, I got
Correct.
you.
They didn't add it.
And the engineer offered it if you all wanted it, but,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you for clarifying that. I knew it was new when I heard it.
So, motion
I
from
will,
Keith.
well, I will say, I will admit that I am incredibly hesitant building on a stream that's only been dried up for 6 years. It makes me incredibly uneasy. 100-year floods are happening every few years, and I understand that, history, as far as we can remember sitting in this room, might be that didn't flood, but I feel like we also have neighbors who come in regularly who tell us, oh, I wasn't flooding before, and now I'm regularly flooding, and the berm had to be rebuilt. And we need more data. We need more data from the EAB needs to have more data. I think the staff needs to have more data on maybe sort of what the climate, what our climate shifting is looking like as we are building in different areas that have the streams.
Stormwater being implemented on this particular lot, how does
I
it cover that?
I think if it were built on where the stream was, I think that would satisfy it. But I think for me, my biggest fear is that there are homes here, there are duplexes here, which we agree that is getting us a little closer to the affordable housing. We're putting families where there could be a flood, where there was previously a stream, and that, if I were to be sitting here in a couple of years, that's the case, I could not have been like, okay, let me vote for that. But I don't fault the developer, because with the information that we have, I think we're sort of proceeding, to your point, we're proceeding as best we can. For that reason, I will not be voting in favor of this, and I think that we as a town need to work towards that. I'll be curious as to what, I appreciate knowing that you have an environmental background. I'll be curious as to what Councilman Gant has to say. He is, his day job is with the EPA. I think we have to do some more digging as if streams are indeed drying up. I have no idea what that looks like across the town. If streams are drying up across the town, we need to have a better understanding of what that's doing to our topography, what that's doing for development, what that's going to mean for the short and long term for families. And I just know that the FEMA right now is struggling with the fact that 100-year floodplains are not sufficient, and so for that reason, I would not be comfortable voting for it.
All right. So we do have a motion from Keith. Do we have a second?
I'll second Keith's motion.
All right, we have a second from Alyssa. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposing?
Nay.
Nay.
Two noes. All right. So Diane, I guess this still passes, is that correct?
I'm sorry. So as a reminder to the folks who have been on the planning board, and then to Daniel, who's new, you do have to write out why you voted, you had a dissenting vote. And yes, you can fill it out either on paper or on the computer.
Yeah, there is a soft copy as well.
And we do need that before you leave this evening.
All right, so 22 CZ 18 passes. Item number 4, Sarah, you're going to talk to us about a public hearing and possible motion regarding rezoning case 22 CZ 13, the 2021 North Salem Street PUD.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. Just as a reminder, this, for those of you who were here in October, this was presented in the public hearing, was held for rezoning case 22CZ13 for 2021 North Salem Street PUD. So I'll just kind of go over here real quick. We are talking about a 6-acre parcel here on the west side of North Salem Street in northeast Apex. This here is the site then that we are looking at. You can see it is wooded, undeveloped. There are some existing historic structures on the site. The property is currently zoned residential agricultural. The requested rezoning is planned unit commercial development. The land use map recommends medium density residential. The rezoning is limited to 6.7 dwelling units per acre. It does sit on the transit route, so getting near the 7 units per acre is supportive of the transit orient development context map, which this basically fronts on, Salem Street included in that. So that density is consistent with the land use map. These are some of the existing structures. It's an existing Tudor house, barn and tobacco barn. This is the proposed pod here with access here. It's a maximum of 40 units total, so townhomes. And then for future connectivity, a stub street will be provided here. Has 20-foot type B perimeter buffer and then thoroughfare buffer along Salem Street. The site will extend utilities. Here is illustration of the future townhome elevations. Bring you guys back here to the site. So in regard to when y'all saw this last, I have, so you saw this at your October 11th meeting, placed in front of your seats tonight. Although yours doesn't have the chicken scratch on it, is the new conditions offered from the applicant. There is a total of 5. These are in response to zoning conditions that were recommended by the Environmental Advisory Board. These were, I believe at the last meeting, there perhaps was the start of some discussion of these. There was not the commitment at the time, but here in front of you are the 5 additional zoning conditions from the EAB board that the applicant has committed to. So in addition to everything included in your package, they are committing to these 5 zoning conditions. And then just as a reminder, and for those new members, this project is committing to 4 affordable units. So that's 10% of the overall development because it is limited to 40. And I believe it's at, no, of the 40, sorry, it's committing to at least 1, I'm sorry, based on 100% AMI. Can't read my own chicken scratch. So they're committing to, sorry for any stress in the back. Glasses and a mask sometimes makes a little bit of a challenge there. So of the 40, there is 1 affordable housing unit being provided at 100% AMI. So again, the changes, since you've seen it last, are printed out in front of you and are those 5 zoning conditions. I'll be happy to answer any questions. And the applicant, hopefully fully resuscitated now, is here should y'all have any other questions.
If I recall correctly, this was the capital area preservation questions, which is how we ended up with it coming back.
Yes.
Can you let us, thank you for these additions. Can you let us know where that stands? That was, if I recall correctly in reading, that was what was left out, sort of outstanding.
Yes, I do not have any other updates. If the applicant has any updates to provide, they can address those, but I'm.
I can.
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
I'll let them address it. I don't have anything.
Sarah, I do have
Yes.
a question in regards to these signs. These signs are supposed to stop me as a potential homeowner there from building a barbecue pit behind my house in the RCA area?
Correct. So these are sort of what was discussed at in the previous.
Yep.
Yes, these signs are just to let you know, hey, this is the boundary of the
Not your
RCA.
property, but there's nothing behind you, and if you build on it, who stops me?
It's the town.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Yes, so these are in response to essentially field conditions that things that we are running into out in the field is that we do have residents who are, unknowingly.
Expand, yeah.
Yep.
So do we need to consider that for UDO? You will not be here. We'll take that up at another time.
I will let y'all decide.
What kind of signs would they be? How big?
Right.
I think kind of like your pet waste signs, on the, it's just the,
I'm just thinking like, when you have tree protection fence and it's got the big white placard every 50 feet, that's almost as ugly as.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might as well just put
Put a fence.
pet bathroom area.
Right.
'Cause that's what it's going.
they're more like this size. We have seen them in some of the site plans, like in the details, sort of what you think about like handicap parking signage or EV parking signage, more the little guy size.
13 by.
But you guys could have, right, put limitations on that, or when it comes to you for a UDO amendment, then you guys can spec it all out.
So this is a standard request from the Environmental Advisory Board.
Right.
I don't think staff necessarily agrees with it. That's why it's not been brought forward for UDO amendment. I think that town council, you all certainly should make a recommendation on these, and town council needs to decide, do they think this is a condition that makes sense or not? And if it does not, then maybe ask the EAB to stop asking for it.
That would be ideal,
To
yes.
be honest, that's where we're hoping it goes.
Yeah.
Keith's gonna.
We can't regulate content of signs, so it doesn't make any sense to put it in the UDO.
Not to derail the conversation away from this case, but is there purpose because people are encroaching into the?
Yes.
Well, isn't that an HOA, something that when you
Yeah.
buy the house, clear as day where you're not supposed to go, and it can be enforced by the HOA and not be in front of a board like this, right?
Yes, and the HOA is actually the one that's responsible for replanting the RCA area. When we send a notice of violation, it doesn't go to the person that cleared the area, it goes to the property owner. And so we have had cases where people have cleared HOA land, and now the HOA and the property owner are in a civil lawsuit, getting sued over that situation. So
They
it,
should know where their boundaries are.
Yes,
Like
I mean,
everybody else. Not
You
just
have a
this
plot
place.
map, yeah, you have a plot
People,
map with
it's their
markers.
responsibility to know where their boundaries are.
Yes.
I bet you do run into that problem, because people do that all the time. They move out.
Yeah, they kind of leak, yeah.
They leak. That's a fun way to put it.
yeah, it's, signs are things that tend to disappear. People will remove them. That's why staff's not been particularly supportive of trying to try to do this, because at some point, signs end up being litter. They blow
Yep.
away.
Yep.
So,
I did have one question about one of the conditions about the color temperature of the lightings. It's not about the fact that they're using full cutoff, but why? I think we just passed a UDO amendment to regulate street lighting, and it had to be, I think the maximum was 3,500 degrees, and now it's down to 3,000. And I feel like we're getting really to like an orange color, whereas like the crisp white, I mean, this is just personal preference. I like the crisp white. I don't like the blue like you see at Westford, which is purple, but that's like 20,000. I think 5,000 is like a crisp white, but we're deviating from that. Is there a reason why?
Whenever we worked on the UDO amendment to set the maximum color temperature at 3,500 Kelvin, there were some that wanted it to be further. The Environmental Advisory Board was just newly forming, I think, at the time, if I can remember my timing correctly. But at the time, we were concerned about industry standard and the additional cost of going down to 3,000. It's becoming more common now to be able to get 3,000. I think the costs are coming down. And so the Environmental Advisory Board is requesting that it be a warmer light. And there's some research that there's benefit to certain animals, and there's some research along those lines. But I mean, my research was that 3,500 Kelvin was, accepted in a lot of cases. I think the International Dark Sky Association prefers and recommends the 3,000 Kelvin.
I mean, and again, not to derail this against this case, but if we're looking out for what's good for Apex, the EAB is just one component, but what if the 5,000 degree temperature actually provides more light and better spread, and it makes for a safer road or a safer community when you're going about at night? I mean, are we throwing the baby out with the bathwater on this?
These lights are not for street lights.
Okay.
Our standard for street lights is, I believe, 3,500 Kelvin now. I believe, I could be wrong on that, but
We don't regulate that. The UDO regulates site lighting, so on-site, not within the right-of-way, not along streets.
My position is we would match the UDO, that way you have a consistent color anyway, because now if you do 3,000, you're gonna have like an orange and a slightly less orange light on this development.
So this condition is for non-residential buildings, so this would be,
Maybe-
But are there any non-residential buildings in this proposal?
I was just gonna say, unless
I should
there's.
have opened up with that. I just wasted about
amenity
3 minutes of
center.
our lives we'll never get back.
Yeah.
Only if there was an amenity center.
But I've learned something.
Okay. So if there was a pool house or some kind of neighborhood clubhouse, that would have these lights. Otherwise, it would be the normal matching the UDO.
Well,
We don't regulate lights on single-family structures, so like your porch light, we don't measure that.
Right, but this
So
is for
all the
non-residential.
townhomes, whatever
Will have a
the
standard.
people, whatever the HOA buys or the homeowners
Yep.
buy, this would come into play for any common area that may have a proposed light, whether it's a pool house or area near the mail kiosk or
Okay.
whatnot.
So should not be a concern, I guess is what I'm hearing. Any other questions for Sarah?
So I just wanted to let you all know that something that is being worked on, but I don't know when it will be coming forward, is a new lighting ordinance. And in the draft, it has 3,500K, but where possible, 3,000K is preferable. So if the UDO is changed per the current draft, it would keep it at 3,500 as the requirement.
So no further questions for Sarah, is that right? All right. Would the applicant like to speak?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Group. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm going to just bring the conditions up so we can talk about them. And I'm not going to repeat anything that Sarah provided either last month or this month associated with the details of the case. I think that's all pretty straightforward. I did want to talk about the conditions and address a couple of things. First, the signs. I mean, that is us complying with the recommendation of the Environmental Advisory Board, as you've heard. I don't think we have any burning desire to install those signs. But with that said, the EAB has asked for them, and we're happy to comply because it's kind of no harm, no foul. And we have been hearing from folks at the town council that they want to see kind of full compliance with what EAB is recommending. And so part of our motivation is to make everybody happy. So just want to be crystal clear on the signs. It's been an entertaining conversation, if nothing less. And the same is true for, again, the international dark sky standards and the color of the lighting. Mr. Akers, that is, again, just a straight out of the EAB recommendations. It's something that we can comply with. It applies to non-residential buildings, so it would comply, as was noted, it would be the mail kiosk. We don't currently have a plan for an amenity center on this site, at least not a robust amenity center. But, recognizing this applicant could go away and somebody else could come along with a different proposal. Again, just trying to make the folks at the EAB feel like they've been heard. I do want to note that we have added the 4 homes with the solar PV system, as was at least partly recommended by the EAB. I think they were asking for substantially more, but we feel like the 4 homes is it's 10% of the development. That's a meaningful amount of the development, and we've identified some areas that will be south facing where that will actually be practical and beneficial. I do want to talk to Ms. Sherman, your comment related to the historic structures on the site. And I want to make clear with respect to how this case is currently postured in front of you. And as well as what the ordinance says. And so what we have identified in our PUD is that there are historic structures on the property. Once those are identified, that carries with it requirements of the town's UDO associated with what do you do with those historic structures. And there's essentially 2 options. One, you save it in its current place and you put a preservation easement and you bring it up to standards associated with that, or you can move it and do all of those things as well. We don't know what direction we're going to go with the home at this time, other than to tell you we're going to comply with the town's requirements for it as of today. Now, I will tell you, and I wasn't here last month, I apologize, I was out of town. I have had a lot of conversations relative to this historic home with folks on the town council about council priorities associated with preservation of this structure. Also the possibility of preservation of other historically significant structures within the town. Don't know exactly how those conversations are going to go. I feel real good that by the time we get to town council, my client will have a very firm understanding about what council priorities are, and that we will be able to meet those priorities. But for purposes of tonight, as the case is being presented to you, we're going to be subject to the ordinance requirements with respect to saving historic structures, and that's probably the best that I can give to you tonight. So with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have relative to the site. It's a not terribly complicated piece of property. It's 40 townhomes, 6 acres, or 48 townhomes, 6 acres. And it's consistent with the land use plan. So with that, happy to answer any questions you may have.
So Jason, just for clarifying purposes, because you were not here last month, hope you enjoyed your vacation. There was a concern about meeting the ordinance and it being able to be preserved in relation to the cost of what that was going to be.
Yep.
It sounds like you were plainly stating that because this has been identified as a historic site and CAP has been engaged, that the house will be taken care of in some capacity to be determined, but that you will be following the recommendations as it relates to CAP and the current UDO as it relates to the property.
Generally speaking, yes, and I want to be real clear in this
Yes.
answer to you, Ms. Sherman. We work together all the time on these projects, and I want to be forthcoming. There has been a suggestion by more than one council member that potentially this house is not worth saving, and that they may potentially rather have us use the resources that would be used associated with restoring this home on a different piece of property that the town has identified as a historically important property. So those are conversations that are currently underway with the town council, getting very direct feedback from them related to their priorities. Because this is this is a simple case with kind of a very sticky wicket associated with it. And I didn't want to bring any confusion associated with that to your table, because as it relates to the way that this case is currently being presented to you, we're subject to the UDO. If the council decides they want us to do something different, that's essentially what we're going to do.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for your explicit
Yes.
information. Thank
Sure
you.
thing.
Y'all have been working on this.
A little bit.
I can tell.
A little bit.
Yes.
Thinking outside the box of possibly going somewhere else where they may think is more important. That's a good option if you
That's
get
a
there.
big step.
That's,
That's a big step.
a big
We heard a
step.
lot about moving it and how to
they
not
might
move
keep
it.
it, or
and-
if not, they
yeah.
decide they may want to say, look, this house needs it more.
Mhm.
We appreciate you working with the council on that.
I'd like to take credit for the idea, but it actually came from a council member.
Well, thanks to them.
We're moving forward with it. That's good. Other questions for the applicant? Jeff, any concerns?
My concern is that once the cow leaves the barn, you can't bring the cow back into the barn. And if the, I'll say shortcut is taken in this case, I will guarantee you it's not the last shortcut we will see. And there will be prized possessions that will be lost to this town forever.
Yeah, and Mr. Hastings, just to respond to that, I think that a consistent theme of messaging that I've received from council relative to this particular topic is on that point. And that is that historic preservation is incredibly valuable to the town. I think another consistent theme that I've been hearing from the council relative to this particular structure is a question associated with, is this really the type of structure that we need to save, that we want to save?
And with all due respect to the town council, they're not the experts that Capillary Preservation is.
I understand. I just want to relay to you the feedback that we've been
And
getting.
considering the fact that 2/3 of the houses that Capillary Preservation has analyzed in the last 5 years were not worth saving in there.
Understood.
When they say that one is worth saving, I gotta go with the experts in the room.
Completely understand.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I want to change gears. And looking at this site and traveling up and down North Salem Street, could you expand more on, reading through the paperwork, the application, and the staff report, it says right now that the entrance and exit, it looks like it's gonna be a full movement, and it's gonna be to be determined by DOT.
Correct.
And just looking at this site, and I understand there's another business that was slightly, well, I guess it would be west of this location, could not have a looped driveway access to be able to, for his own safety of his own clients, to be able to loop in and loop out, because DOT would not allow driveway access any further up that hill for a line of sight. So I'm just wondering how you plan to, you know,
Handle the driveway permit?
handle the driveway, and
Yeah.
it looks like, just looking at the topography of it, I mean, it is at the very tip top of the hill, so
Yep.
both sides are coming right up to it.
Yep.
And that's, you know, just a safety concern that I just want to point out, and that's a really blind area right there.
Understood. And I haven't had any direct conversations with DOT on that point. I don't know if anybody with the team has. I've got, I see Mr. Tang's moving, so that's a relief.
I'm just gonna let you handle it. No, we haven't talked to DOT at length about it, and you're absolutely right. There is a sightline issue. That's why that note is there,
Your
is
name,
that location.
Your name, please?
Oh, my name is Ed Tan with Withers Ravenel, sorry. That location is subject to DOT approval, depending where they feel, and we all feel that it's safe for the movement to occur. So we know that it's not gonna be any further left of the site, because that's actually worse. And if you keep going to the right, it may improve, but then it depends on the opposing driveways that are out there and where everybody's comfortable with having a safe movement. So that's why the note is there. It's, you know, something that has to be worked out at the time of the master subdivision and the CD approval, so.
Tim, did I address your concerns?
Doesn't make me feel any better.
Yeah.
It's
I
kinda
know
like,
the area
we're
you're
gonna- We're
talking
gonna kick
about.
the can down the road a little further and let DOT determine where to put something. I mean, I understand this is a rezoning, whether or not somebody can or cannot, you know, put these townhomes in this location. But you've gotta look at it, just stepping back and looking, is this a good place? I would actually say if this area were to develop, you would actually want the property to the northeast and carry on up through into Salem Church and just have a better
Correct.
entrance and exit out of this area. And it's actually kind of a larger project, but actually probably fit better if you could snag these other properties. But just from a safety standpoint,
Right.
that would make me feel a little bit better about, you know, cresting that hill.
Yes.
Other question is, does DOT plan on widening this area? And I think we had a project not long ago that, let's
Yep.
see, we were gonna widen
Talked
down
about
somewhere.
widening
I don't know where it was gonna stop at, but it is gonna come down Salem to some point.
I'm not aware of DOT doing any widening. We are proposing to widen our frontage to meet the town's thoroughfare plan, which is a 3-lane section through here. So we're dedicating the right-of-way and doing the widening that's necessary on our side of the road. And I think during this whole rezoning process, the plan was actually updated. I believe the transportation plan was updated from a 60-foot right-of-way to an 80-foot. So I'm not sure if that was related to, I don't see Russell here tonight, but I don't know if that was related to your comment about DOT doing any work. I'm not aware of them having any projects out here to do anything, so.
Yeah, I think they were gonna do some more on the south side along where those railroad tracks were at. That was part of the Martin property. That was what, Camden and Salem with that high-density apartments.
They were gonna do
There was
something
something
like
that
that.
popped
Little
up
bit
there
up
that
the
was
road.
gonna come down
Further,
Salem.
Yeah. So, all right. There's gonna be a bus stop out there as well, is that right? Is that why we're increasing the frontage?
I believe there's a transportation,
Yes.
a transit stop
Mhm.
being
Proposed.
along the road.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So that was a condition that we put in there, so.
Any other questions for the applicant? All right, I will open up the public comment section. If there's anybody here who's gonna talk about public sign in please and come forward. Did we get any emails about this one? No, we did not. All right, And I will close the public comment and bring it back to the board for discussion and possible motion.
I will make a motion to, approve this rezoning. And as I do that, I want to express, my extreme displeasure, with council's potential conversations. I agree with Mr. Hastings that, and warning that I hope that they do not, proceed. I think that's a real slippery slope to go down, and I'd hate for us to go down, but, as it sits before us today and, the commitments proposed to us today, there is no reason not to. So I would make that motion, but I strongly caution the council to consider it differently.
Thank you, Tina, for the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it. I think that there's a lot of good things going on with this. We didn't even talk about the elevations on the townhomes. I think they're really attractive. I think Baker does a good product. They're up in my neck of the woods all over there, and they have a very nice, attractive product. And to the street section, doing a full 3-lane through that section, I think would allow, as we crest the, I think it's the only way DOT would allow it, is as you come up over the hill, you have a 3-lane section, a left turn in. That's the only way I could see it happening. So at least we'll get a full 3-lane section through that frontage. And then the final thing, I think I brought it up last time, there's a pretty significant tree on the south corner along North Salem, and it looks like the applicant is looking to preserve that tree, which is pretty cool, because I think it's like a 60-inch tree. I think it's got a lot of good things going for it, so I'm in support.
Awesome. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposing? All right, so this one passes unanimously with some caution to town council.
Chair, can we take a bio break?
Yes.
I know we have one more item, so I apologize.
One more item. All right, can we take a 5-minute recess? Well, actually, hold on. So CZ 22 CZ 13 passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll take a 5-minute recess. Do you need a motion for that?
We did.
Motion.
All right,
Recess.
Second. All right, 5-minute recess, please. Back at 6:05. go ahead and call back to order. It's 6:05. And Amanda, you have one item to discuss left, a possible motion regarding various amendments to the UDO.
Yes, so a couple simple UDO amendments. The first one is to amend all references to the department, planning department's name, from planning community development to planning department, and for the director from director of planning and community development to planning director. The reason for this change is the town has recently undergone an organizational study, and the community development section of planning is moving into a different department that will be titled Community Development and Neighborhood Connections. Yes, I got it right. And so that all those changes will be fully implemented soon, and so we have to change all the references everywhere to reflect that in the UDO and then our applications and everything. So, any questions on that one? There will probably be other department and director titles throughout the UDO that will be amended once all those changes get worked out, but ours was the easiest. The next amendment is to the buffering section, just to clarify buffer planting requirements, and just comments that our zoning compliance officers and planners sometimes have to make with applicants. And so, and then just some best practices for planting requirements. So in our opaque buffer planting standards, we have a requirement for low-level shrub screening plants. And so we want to ensure that those plantings are spaced no further than 6 feet apart. So that's an important planting standard there. And then finally, just to clarify that increased buffer width indicates an increase in the number of plants. So in order to maintain that opacity, if the buffer's getting wider, you're probably going to increase the number of plants. And we've had some people that have disagreed with us on that. So this is to make past interpretations of what this intent of this section clear. And that's it for today. And planning staff's recommending approval, of course.
Any questions?
I do have a question, Amanda, about that. If an applicant has a 50-foot type A buffer and they wanted to commit to something larger for various reasons, and a portion in addition to the 50-foot would be undisturbed, could they utilize the undisturbed and then shrink back down to the 50-foot and plant that as type A, and then undisturbed is in addition to? Or would that?
So my suggestion is if this is occurring as part of a rezoning condition, that you have, like, let's say the total was going to be 70 feet, just for sake of argument, that you had a 20-foot undisturbed buffer and then a 50-foot type A buffer immediately adjacent to
So
that.
it would be a 70-foot type A.
So you would not say 70-foot type A, because then you may be required to plant those understory, those shrubs at the lower level, because the intent of the type A buffer is that you have an opaque vegetated screen all the way up. So we have shrubs that are 5 to 6 foot high at the time of planting, some medium story trees, and some large story trees. So you get that full opacity with vegetation. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Any other questions? Possible motion?
Motion to amend the UDO.
Melissa with a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Daniel. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. And I need one more motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
All right, Tim and Keith, thank you.